Massachusetts held its primary elections for races including governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. Geoff Diehl has won the Republican nomination for governor. He was endorsed by former President Trump, and yes, he repeated lies about the 2020 election being stolen. He's going to face off against Democratic Attorney General Maura Healey in November. So CBS News political director Finn Gomez is joining us now to talk a little bit more about the results. So Finn, how could this matchup for governor play out in November?
Anne-Marie, Republican Geoff Diehl is a conservative who is backed by former President Donald Trump, won in the Massachusetts GOP primary for governor over a moderate Republican candidate in Chris Doughty. Diehl will face Democrat Maura Healey, the state's attorney general. If Healey wins, she becomes the first woman elected as governor in Massachusetts history and the first openly gay person. Though the Massachusetts is a blue state, it has a tendency to elect moderate Republicans to the governor's house. Centrist Republican Charlie Baker is the current two-term Republican governor who decided not to run for another term, and only one Democrat has been elected to that position since 1991. So it's a really interesting race, and we'll see how that plays out. But again, for someone like Diehl, who's a more conservative candidate, it's much more difficult to win in a state, in the base state, that traditionally votes for these centrist, moderate Republicans. So the outcome that I talked to several Democrats about that just this morning, who say the outlook for them, for Healey, is strong. It's good.
You know, the thing about gaining a Trump endorsement, Finn, is that you can't just be a Republican. You can't just be like really conservative. You have to say that you question the results of the 2020 election in some way. And we've seen some other candidates who have been endorsed by the former president who have gone like so far as to suggest that if they would win, they would maybe revisit the elections in that state or revisit the outcome of the 2020 election. This seems so extreme to me, but here we are. When we look at the landscape now, can we determine what sort of influence the former president is continuing to have on the primary season?
He continues to have a very strong influence on the Republican Party. And with having this influence, he has been a big reason why they've had a group of Republican candidates who might win in the primaries, who've gotten the Trump-backed endorsements, who've gotten all this support from the former president because they believe in election denialism, because they believe the 2020 presidential election was stolen without evidence or really any sort of justification for that. And because of that, however, in the general election, they face defeat in many of these cases, in many of these battleground states and battleground areas and battleground congressional districts because of that positioning. Because when you're facing, like Massachusetts, for example, where it's a progressive state, it's a blue state, like that sort of position just doesn't fly. So for someone for Diehl, for example, it makes their chances of winning much dimmer in places like that.
I'm wondering, Finn, if we've seen candidates kind of give the former president what he wants as they vie to be the Republican representative. And then once they've achieved that, start to sort of massage their messaging, soften their messaging, particularly if they're in a state like Massachusetts.
No, absolutely. I think if you look at Diehl, he would have to move to the center. He would have to reposition himself to even stand a chance, frankly, at winning against Healey. But you're also seeing, like, for example, in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, the Senate candidate there, Dr. Oz, has tried to move to the center on certain issues, but he's sort of frankly handcuffed by some of the primary positions. He also faced a very brutal primary, but frankly, because of his position, because of trying to get that Trump-backed support in that state, it makes it difficult when you go into the general election in some of these cases, in some of these battleground areas again. So yeah, it does. It is. They try to maneuver themselves, but sometimes there's so many obstacle courses. There's an obstacle course, and obstacles in front of them that it makes getting to a position where Democratic voters, where independent voters, and even moderate Republicans may decide to go with the other team.
Listen, before we let you go, going to head a little further south now. I want to ask you about some infighting between Florida Senator Rick Scott and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. What is going on there?
Frankly, it stems, Anne-Marie, from a friction that has continued, that has existed throughout the entire primary and midterm season. And that is because Rick Scott, who's in charge of the NRSC, which is the campaign arm of the Senate Republicans, who's trying to win, who's trying to win in November, who's going to have a majority seats in November. There's been criticism by McConnell and others for how they've run and how they place candidates. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, has questioned the caliber of candidates that have been placed in some of these battleground states, and you're seeing that. You're seeing that again. That maybe, like we just talked about, Anne-Marie, that these are some candidates who may have won in the primary, but who may not be the best candidates to win in November. And there's also a money issue where Rick Scott has, frankly, and the NRC have not raised as much funds as their Democratic rivals. So in some of these places, in battleground places, you're seeing that much more money is needed to remain competitive against the Democrats. So Republican candidates in some of these instances have looked to get money from other sources, other entities, like the Senate Leadership Fund, which is a super PAC aligned with McConnell, which has raised millions of dollars for some of these battleground states. But it's a friction that continues. It also stems from the fact that Rick Scott, may challenge McConnell if the Republicans do take back the Senate. But they have to take back the Senate first.
Yeah. These midterms are going to be, if nothing else, very interesting, Fin Gomez. I hope you're getting a lot of rest
drama,
now.
Marie. A lot going on.
Yeah. Get the rest now, because come November, you're going to be a busy man. Thank you so much.
2 months away. 2 months away. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
We'll be right back.